What an odd couple. Notice that Marty is not comfortable with change. He's set in his routine, and Flo is the kind of person that invites change, even though she always dresses the same way and has the same cheap perfume. Which one are you attracted to? Which one is more like you? Which one do you recognize from the people around you? Did you catch the existential question at the end there? Marty is examining not just his routines, he's examining the order of his life. It becomes very easy to stay in a routine. Routines are an outcome for our need to control our environment. Routines show stability, and they show order. Churches happen to love routines. We do most of the same things all the time, and we have to do things continually in the same way. People will recognize them. And somehow or another, within those routines, we find the Spirit of God. But sometimes routines become ritual, and then rituals become institutionalized, and they become rites. And somehow or another, we forget the meaning of those rituals. We forget why we're going through those rites. But yet here we come, Sunday after Sunday. Thing is that when there is change, and there is always change, humanity has the ability to adapt. Some of us adapt very quickly, depending on what the change is. We're forced to change. There is no other option. But when change hits a group of people, when it is collective, it might take a little bit longer. It might take a generation or two. And there's usually a lot of suffering that goes with it. A lot of marching feet that accompany the change. But change always does come. Change is just one of those things that finds its way into our lives. The challenge is to adapt to the change within our own lifetimes. The challenge is to not wait for another generation to have to deal with it. Marty is asking the very important question, is God calling me to a life of routine? There's a more introspective way to it, and that is God calling me to the unexamined life? One of the things I love about church is that we're always putting the mirror before your face. We're always asking you to take a look and to examine. Take a look at your priorities. So that as you always passing the same location, all of a sudden for you to notice that there's some bins out there and that they're asking for you to drop something, some charity for some other people. Or that possibly there's something wrong in our community. There might be something that needs to be changed. And if we don't act together, if we don't move together as a church, change just may not happen, or at least not that quickly. Marty, our character, has fallen into a rut. And the difference between a rut and a routine is that when you're in a rut, your routine doesn't work. When you're in a rut, creativity has been sapped out. When you're in a rut, it becomes difficult to connect with others and to feel their pain. When you're in a rut, you don't recognize that the child next to you is misbehaving possibly for some very, very deep reasons, acting out something that might be very wrong in his or her life or in the community. Thankfully, Marty had somebody next to him that is comfortable with change. Thankfully, Marty had someone that would walk with him because he had an epiphany of sorts. Marty had this epiphany that possibly something about the day needed to change, that it just couldn't be the same routine as always. And it took a young child to kick him into that epiphany. As a church, we just went through the liturgical season of Epiphany. That's the season right after Christmas, but before Lent. And Epiphany is that season where we see the light. The light has come into our world. And with it, there's all these metaphors. The metaphor of seeing something new, of the light giving us this aha moment. But in Lent, we're supposed to do something with the Epiphany. Lent is that journey that we undertake to get us ready for Easter. In the first century Jerusalem, the temple was in a bit of a rut. The temple was in a rut because everything had been figured out. Everything had been figured out. Every single thing that was to be said had been turned into a law. And there was a law for everything. If God was happy with you, it's because you were following the laws, and it showed. If you had not been following the laws, that means that God would not be happy with you, and then you know what? That too would show. When everything is figured out, there is no room for an epiphany. Think about the Martys in our lives, the people who have everything figured out. When you know everything and you have structured your life in such a way so that you don't need to know anything else, epiphanies are hard to come by. There's no need for an epiphany because you already know it all. Epiphanies are for other people. But then sometimes, as a collective, as a society, a voice comes in and speaks for us and gives us the word that we need to hear. And that's where the story of Nicodemus comes in. Nicodemus, as a temple leader, was listening to Jesus, and he received the epiphany. He heard it, and he's full of questions. And now, Nicodemus is supposed to be a smart fellow, but somehow or another, he is taking the message of Jesus literally. And he says, what do you mean I need to be born again? How could I do that? Maybe he wasn't taking it literally. Maybe he was also speaking figuratively and saying, you know, I'm too old for this. I've already been there, done that. Go talk to someone else. Go talk to somebody younger who might be able to change. But Jesus not only tells him that he needs to change his routine, he needs to change his entire life. Being born again is becoming born into a new person. That is the way to experience God and to live in right relationship with God. And it is not necessarily through our routine, but it's through an intentional awareness of what God brings to us every day, of the possibility for the day, and what we ought to do with it. Jesus went ahead and spoke to Nicodemus and said some words that have been put down in the gospel that have defined our faith. For God so loved the world that he gave his only son. Talk about something new entering the world. Talk about a change in the routine. Now, this is a very personal question. What is your routine like? Is there room for God in it? This is a very personal question. Have you had an epiphany? How are you going to get ready during the Lenten journey? Because nobody could do it for you. And that's why it's personal. Not your loved ones, not your co-workers, not the neighborhood, and not the church. We try our hardest, but in reality, this is something you must do. And you must do it in every single way that you possibly can. There is advice about how to deal with change. Just Google the words, and you'll come up with all sorts of things. But ultimately, the church is more about helping you becoming born again, and to live it, and to live that faith, to live that assurance in life, so that it reflects your giving, so that it reflects your receiving, so that it reflects your relationships, and reflects the joy that you have. So get ready. Get ready for the journey, because nobody else could do it for you.